Today on CityCast Philly, we're talking about what we learned in the first and only mayoral debate, how fans are recovering after that devastating Phillies loss, and a more delicious debate, depending on who you ask. It's Friday, October 27th. I'm Trinae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Joining me this week is Chris Brennan, political reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Hey, Chris.
Hey, happy to be here.
Great. And OJ Spivey, sports correspondent at the Philadelphia Tribune. Hey, OJ.
Hi, Trinae. Thank you as always.
Okay, so I've been reading some articles recently and seeing a lot of posts on social media about this love-hate relationship to Wawa pizza. Have you tried Wawa's pizza yet?
As a matter of principle, I refuse to try Wawa pizza.
Why?
It's just not their game.
OJ, what's your feelings?
Well, I kind of agree with Chris. It's kind of cringeworthy to want to try Wawa pizza, but I think at some point I probably will try it just to see because I'm adventurous that way, but I'm not very optimistic.
My mouth is dropped from this. You should try it. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And you know, Wawa has our back. They've had our back for so many years. Just try it and let me know what you think after you try it. Is that a deal?
Deal.
Deal. Yes.
Okay. And we also have an episode where we delve into some really great pizza spots. So I definitely recommend y'all check that out. Okay, let's get into the news of the week. A lot has happened in Philly. Let's start talking about the first and only debate between mayoral candidates. This aired on KYW News Radio. They hosted this live debate this week. Chris, was there a clear winner in this debate between Democratic candidate Sherelle Parker and Republican candidate David O?
I think you'd have to split the difference. Sherelle Parker is far and away the leading candidate to be the next mayor of Philadelphia. And so she has been reluctant to engage with David O. There's no scheduled televised debate. There's been some candidate forums, but this was the first time they met head to head. It was on KYW News Radio during drive time, which is a very busy time for them. So I would say that Parker won in that she has limited David O's engagement, and O won in that he finally got her to engage in some way.
And I also read this article in Axios Philadelphia, and you just mentioned it, that this wasn't a televised debate, even though O had really pushed for a televised debate so that voters, as he kind of said it, can see body language. Is that important? I mean, CityCast Philly, we're an audio-driven digital platform. Do you think visual platforms appeal more to voters deciding on who they want to vote for?
I definitely think a televised debate would get a larger audience than a radio debate. KYW News Radio did offer a video option. You could watch it on their website. Right. But, KYW is, primarily a radio station that people listen to in their cars while driving to work in the morning.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that they actually said during this debate. Did we learn anything new about the candidates, especially with certain topics like policing and crime and education?
So I think that the candidates mostly stuck to their previous positions, although we did get a little bit more detail on what Sherelle Parker said recently when she said that she would use the National Guard to come in to help restore order in some parts of the city, especially in the sections of the city like Kensington that are really suffering from the opioid epidemic. She was clearly dismayed that led some people to think of soldiers on street corners with rifles.
Right. She reminded us, in the debate, that's not what I meant. I meant because, National Guard will help during natural disasters and such like that. So, yeah.
That's exactly right. David O pushed back on that, saying that, they are essentially an arm of the military and that they don't have the kind of training that police officers go through to deal with the kind of situations that they might encounter.
Now, stop and frisk or Terry stops were something big that they talked about during the debate. How did the candidates answer those questions?
So Sherelle Parker has been supportive of the idea of Terry stops, which is the circumstances under which stop and frisk does not violate constitutional rights. It's a stop and frisk when a police officer has a reasonable suspicion that somebody has a weapon, not just that guy looks like he'd carry a gun. David O pushed back on that and said that historically, stop and frisk has been used by white police officers in black neighborhoods to harass and bully people.
Right. He said it would deepen the divide between police and community, almost bully people. Whereas Parker said that she does believe that it would be useful to the police force.
Yes. And she made the point that stop and frisk is a thing that's still happening under the Terry stop and frisk rules, and that she supports it.
Let's talk about education. If there were any students listening to this, they might have rolled their eyes when they heard the term year-long school, which actually is a concept that the district is going to be piloting next year with about 10 schools. Parker talked about how she felt and she supports that year-round school with, some breaks in between. How did O feel about that?
Did not support the concept. He thought that the lives of children require a balance between the classroom and outdoor life and family life and religious instruction. He didn't like it. I thought it was interesting that Parker initially dodged. It's one of the few questions that she did not, initially respond to directly, which was, would this be a mandatory thing for students in Philadelphia? And the KYW News Radio moderators really had to push her to the point where she said that it would not have to be mandatory. And she did say that, the year-round schooling does not mean children in classrooms 5 days every week, 365 days a year. She allowed that there would be breaks in the education cycle.
Another moment in the education section of the debate that stood out to me was both candidates agreed that there needs to be a potential school closings of schools that kind of are in decrepit buildings, demolish those buildings, and hopefully rebuild schools to better support kids.
That's right. And this plays into the standing Commonwealth Court ruling that education funding in the city has not been fair and equitable. And that's a thing that the General Assembly in Harrisburg has been wrestling with, how to equitably fund schools in the city. And part of that would have to be the creation of schools and probably the demolition of outdated buildings that just can't function anymore.
Mm-hmm. Chris, were there any other moments that stood out to you?
I thought the Sixers arena was very interesting. Clearly, David O does not support the idea. His thought was that a Sixers arena, where the gallery stands now on East Market Street, would essentially demolish Chinatown. That Chinatown, which has been around for about 150 years, would cease to exist and would be replaced instead by luxury housing. He went so far as to say that he'd be open to the idea of the Sixers leaving the city if they want to build the arena somewhere else. Sherelle Parker is very much in a let's study it mode, but there was something interesting she said about how she wanted to make sure every neighborhood had a say in this and not just Chinatown. And that just sounded to me very much like a shout out for her to the building trades unions that helped her win the primary and very much want to build this arena.
I see. All right. Well, I just want to remind our listeners that the general election is Tuesday, November 7th, and polls open at 7 a.m. Shifting gears, we have to talk about that huge loss that the Phillies took in Game 7 of the National League Championship Series to the Arizona Diamondbacks on Tuesday. The final score was 4-2. I stayed up on Monday night and Tuesday night, and I was so tired, and I was just crushed. OJ, how are you feeling?
Yeah, it was definitely a devastating loss. Everyone thought that they had it. They started the series up 2-0. Arizona won a couple games, and you thought, okay, they win Game 5 in Arizona, and you got Game 6 and 7, two to win one. Of course, with the crowds at Citizens Bank Park, we had it in the bag, but it was not to be. You had some questionable moves by the manager, but I think overall, the Phillies just could not hit. And Arizona made the adjustments. And when they made the adjustments, the Phillies could not counteract that. We saw them swinging at bad pitches. We saw them always swinging for the home run, which is what they're known to do. And when they can't hit home runs, that's when they tend to struggle. And Arizona took big advantage of that. And that's where we are. And it's just disappointment everywhere. And, we just have to, and I don't even think anybody in the Delaware Valleys won't even bother to watch the World Series between Texas and Arizona because, just why? Because of the disappointment.
I mean, I was so happy that the Astros didn't win. I was like, all right, the Astros didn't win. Okay, we're definitely going to do this, y'all. We got this. When Monday hit, I was just like, oh, dear God. Yeah, it was sad to see. And I hate to see fans just confused, devastated, from the kids to the elders. I hate to see it in the city. I hate to see it. But there are other sports teams we can cheer for. And there's a whole list of them. The Flyers play the Anaheim Ducks on Saturday, the Wells Fargo Center. The Union plays New England in the MLS Cup playoffs. Let's talk about the Eagles. OJ, I've seen some of your posts on social media. You get to go in the locker room and interview the players. How are we feeling so far? How are you feeling so far about the Eagles season? I'm going to say this. I feel uneasy.
Well, I'm just going to ease your anxiety for a bit because you got to put it in perspective. Of course, they're 6-1. They now have the best record in the NFC. Okay. Only Kansas City over in the AFC has a similar record. So 49ers kind of came back down to earth. The Detroit Lions kind of came back down to earth. And with all the flaws that the Eagles have, of course, they have to clean up the turnovers. They have to clean up some of the mistakes and everything. We all see that with Jalen Hurts. But they're 6-1. And for them to come out of the gate at 6-1 this part of the season as a Super Bowl runner-up, most teams that come back from the Super Bowl as a runner-up and Super Bowl loser, they have a Super Bowl hangover. They're not as good the following year. So with all the flaws and all the mistakes that we see on the field, I think they're only going to get better as the season goes along. You want them to stay healthy. Jalen Hurts is kind of ailing a little bit with the knee. That's something to watch, but he's expected to play this weekend. And they just got better, picking up a safety and Kevin Byard from Tennessee. But I think everything is just coming to fruition. And you also have to take in consideration the two new defensive coordinators, Brian Johnson, also Sean Desai.
Okay.
Desai has done a great job. Brian Johnson's still learning and just kind of coexisting with Jalen Hurts. Even though they do have a relationship, that's going to take some time as well. But 6-1, you have to be optimistic considering everything that's going on.
Okay, that's fair. Now, let's talk about this fourth down play that has everyone saying, we don't know. The brotherly shove or that tush push. What are your feelings on that?
Well, it's been a talk of the NFL, and it's really a variation of the quarterback sneak, which has been around football forever, for over 100 years. It's been compared to rugby. So if you ever seen a rugby match, it's sort of like a wedge play. Everybody just gathers and they're just as close to each other as they legally can be because you do have to line up at a certain way. Everybody has to be in unison to avoid penalties. It is a tush push. The quarterback is sneaking, but he is getting help from the wide receiver, maybe the running back. And what the rules allow, you can actually push or guide, so to speak, the quarterback forward, as long as you don't necessarily hold him and you're physically pushing him. It's a basic play, but it takes a lot of physicality and skill as well.
If I could chime in on this as a guy who played rugby for Temple University,
Hey.
rugby has been used as a criticism of this play, which doesn't make any sense to me because American football emerged from rugby. So it's almost going back to where it started.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around forever. So the Eagles, they just had a knack to perfect this play. And again, it's become the tush push. It's become the brotherly shove, depending on who you talk to. The funny thing about it is you see other teams try to execute it and they just don't do well. And, everybody's anticipating another showdown with the San Francisco 49ers later in the season and maybe another NFC championship game. They just tried it the other day and their quarterback got hurt. He's in a concussion
So you can't
protocol.
be stealing our style. Like,
Right. And head coach Nick Sirianni has gone on record and says, hey, everybody doesn't have the offensive line that we have. Everybody doesn't have the quarterback that we have that can squat 600 pounds. So
right.
It's much easier said than done.
Well, I love the play. As long as we get that first down, that I'm happy. So the Eagles are playing the Washington Commanders at the FedEx Field in Maryland this Sunday. And we do have the Sixers. The Sixers are back in season. They play again on Sunday against Portland Trailblazers. OJ, where are we with the Sixers?
You must want me to talk about James Harden. So
yeah, I do.
I guess he is back in town, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But the Sixers have already gone on record saying that he's not going to play in the home opener on Sunday. But we don't know the outcome of what's going to happen. And they do have to work around not having James Harden. They still have the reigning MVP, Joel Embiid. And also another thing to watch is Tyrese Maxey. And with James Harden's absence, you're going to see Tyrese Maxey starting as the point guard now. And from what I saw in the preseason, that he looks pretty good in that role. So that's something to watch. It does give you a reason to go down to the arena to see them play. Again, we don't know how well they're going to be this season. They have made a couple moves, and James Harden has kind of held them hostage until they actually move him. And I know a lot of fans just say they just want him out of here. And it's a shame because it's sort of like a deja vu with what we had to go through with Ben Simmons. So, but, I would encourage everybody to at least just see the maturation of Tyrese Maxey as he now assumes the point guard position with new head coach Nick Nurse.
That's right. And so, OJ, is it a good time? Is it still a good time to be a Philly sports fan?
Oh, it certainly is. From just what we talked about with the Eagles being 6-1, the goal is to get back to the Super Bowl, no matter how well it looks. But again, they're in wonderful shape. They're currently the 1 seed in the NFC. We still have a little bit more than half the season to go, so you want to be optimistic. The Flyers are off to a good start, even though they have said that we are in a rebuild. And again, we don't know the outcome of the Sixers. But again, I still think they'll be competitive enough to have a good season and reach the playoffs. And from there, who knows?
All right, that was OJ Spivey, sports correspondent at the Philadelphia Tribune, and Chris Brennan, political reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you both so much for joining me on CityCast Philly.
A pleasure as always.
Thank you, Trinae. Always fun.
It's time for the tip of the week, where we share a life hack for living in Philly. Here's OJ Spivey with a sports hack.
I would, for people who don't necessarily get access to tickets, I would get on the team's email list, especially for the Wells Fargo Center for Flyers and Sixers games, because they have the assembly room. And usually what they'll release what's called standing room only tickets. And on the morning of, they'll release $25 tickets to get to the assembly room for Flyers or Sixers games. And that is really an underrated part of the arena. And you can get there, you can lounge, you can get private access to food. Just get on that mailing list, get on that text list, and you can get discounted tickets the day of the games.
If you have a tip of the week, we'd love to hear from you too. Call or text us at 215-259-8170. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Our lead producer is Laura Benchoff. Our producers are Abby Fritz, Elizabeth Kama, and Lizzie Goldsmith. Our Hey Philly newsletter editor is Joel Wolfram. And our host is me, Trinae Nuri. Music is by Philly's own Interminable, with additional music from All the Kimonos and James Weldon. If you enjoyed this week of episodes, tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Philly. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend and be safe, y'all. Bye.